Hey guys, welcome back. So we are in our last unit, Modern Global Conflict. This is where we're going to continue lecture from last time. If you remember, we were talking about President Nixon and some of his successes, some of the other things that were troubling. So we come to his greatest trouble of all, which is the Watergate scandal and what happens there. So let's take notes and continue where you left off. And then we're going to get into our next president, Gerald Ford, and then also Jimmy Carter. So we'll start here with where we ended up in the Watergate scandal. This is actually a hotel in Washington, D.C. It still exists. You could stay there and be a part of history, but it's a hotel slash kind of like business park, and there's offices there, and that's where sort of Watergate happens. Why? Because there's a break-in in the Watergate Hotel slash Business Center. On June 17, 1972, 5 men were arrested for breaking in at the Democratic Party office headquarters. So the national headquarters of the Democratic Party were here at the Watergate Hotel in this Watergate building. And they're apprehended by police, and on them they have cash and documents that prove they're employed and members of the committee to re-elect the president. So if you remember who was running for president in 1972, it was Richard Nixon for a second time, his second term. And so that's the organization that was trying to get him reelected to a second time was this CREEP. Great acronym, right? But their purpose, why they ended up being there, they said they were plumbers. So that was kind of the name given to them. But why they were there, just found out through investigation, and was to plant listening devices like bugs on the phones and listen into the conversations and get other info on sort of the Democrat strategy for the national election in November to elect a new president. So two ended up working in the White House, and one worked for the FBI. So we had ties into working into the executive cabinet. Okay, which wasn't a problem for Nixon at the time. So the problem becomes as they sort of break open and investigate these five gentlemen. We have the White House chief of staff, the FBI director, and the presidential counsel resign because of this Whiting controversy, because they would have been maybe found out that they were implicated and had some part of this. At the time, Nixon goes, again, this is 72 when the men are caught. Now we're into 1973. He gives a televised speech, denies any cover up by the White House. I did not know about this, et cetera, et cetera. By June 1973, Nixon gets accused himself by a secret informant that he is actually a part of the cover up and paid hush money to the five men that were in the break in, to not say anything and to plead the Fifth Amendment and to just kind of take the fall for this. So by July 1973, White House aide told the investigation committee that Nixon secretly taped all the Oval Office conversations. We know who that White House aide is, but he went by the code name from the CIA, FBI, launching this investigation of Deep Throat, because he was inside the administration, but secretly meeting with these informants and telling them, hey, I am the informant. Here's the information. Nixon knew about it. He's trying to cover it up. And in fact, we recorded conversations, so you can go and listen to those conversations and find out what the president said. So now the congressional committee had sort of the means to substantiate, the testimony of witnesses and find out for sure if Nixon was involved in the cover up and how deep this investigation was going. So, but Nixon said, hey, it's executive privilege. As head executive, I don't have to give over things to you in an interest in national security. But by October 1973, Nixon ordered the attorney general to fire the Watergate special prosecutor because he refused to accept some compromises in the investigation. So this is looking bad for Nixon, like he's trying to actually sort of squash this investigation and cover it up. So in the end, Nixon turns over tapes to investigators that he's asked to give over, except two tapes of 2 days are missing. Okay, are missing. But after pressure mounts against the president, he eventually finds them. But then one has an 18.5-minute gap in his recording, which he blamed on his secretary. Oh, she didn't record. She accidentally erased that part while she was recording, which ended up coming out later. That was a lie. Okay, so I'm trying to go quick through this. So Congress starts impeachment proceedings. And so they don't actually get to a formal impeachment where they then start. They're just investigating impeachment. We've seen this under Trump the last two times. There's an investigation in the House. They launched an investigation. The first one was the Russian collaboration collusion with Russia to get Trump elected. No, like they didn't find anything. That's why the Senate didn't convict. And then the second time, did Trump was he blocking what transpired on January 6th, and the House brought sort of the actual case to the Senate, but then the Senate didn't confirm and remove the president. So anyways, but for Nixon's case, for January 4th, 1974, Nixon refused to hand over 500 tapes and boxes of evidence that he was asked to do so by the Watergate Senate investigation. But then the Supreme Court comes in Nixon versus the United States and actually says, no, you got to turn over everything. And Nixon says he will comply. So by July 27, 1974, the House approves 2 articles of impeachment, obstruction of justice, and violating the oath of office. And then after they get the tapes, they showed that Nixon, in fact, did order the FBI to halt its investigation 6 days after they began their investigation, which he did lie about, saying he was not trying to cover anything up or squash or obstruct justice, things like that. Okay. And so that became the smoking gun because they now had evidence that Nixon was covering things up, was paying hush money, was trying to stop an investigation. And so it didn't look good. So where he was impeached in the House, they didn't even get the trial to the Senate because by August 8th, he's announcing he's going to resign as president of the United States because he had all of his Republican friends in the Senate be like, yeah, we're going to vote to convict you, buddy. Like you lied, you were covering this up, you violated sort of the terms of being president. So we're coming after you. We're going to convict you. So, and here's his resignation letter. So that's how Nixon leaves. Okay. And so immediately afterwards, Gerald Ford, who is vice president, is sworn in as president, and he's going to serve out the remainder of that term, which Nixon was elected for. And then he's going to pardon one of his first actions for Nixon for all crimes he committed or may have committed, which did not win him any favor with Republicans or Democrats. And the American people were very upset about that too. But then he continues Nixon's policies through 1977 when the next president, Jimmy Carter, takes over. Okay, and so you see the approval of Ford. He assumes the presidency, and then he grants pardons to Nixon, and it plummets. And then it starts to go up as he's maybe continuing some decent policies. But when Saigon falls to the North Vietnamese in 1975, and we technically lose South Vietnam as an ally, and it becomes one country under communism, starts to dwindle. He actually survives 2 assassination attempts within 2 weeks of each other. He's shot at both times. He's not wounded. He's not hit, but on 2 separate occasions in 2 separate places within 2 weeks, he was, some people were trying to take his life. Okay, it kind of shows how unpopular he was. I mean, presidents are down here in this popularity, 40% approval rating many times. But it never sort of justifies being assassinated for. Here's Nixon, though. So he starts as president, very popular, and then things go down, especially as he reaches he's really up here. I mean, he wins re-election in 1972 by a landslide, no question. Then once sort of this stuff, the 5 men break into the Watergate hotel, come out, then people start to kind of lose their trust in Nixon. And then as more investigation happens, and then, as he leaves, basically very kind of unpopular at 25%. That's really the lowest most presidents ever get and have gotten. He was the lowest president in approval rating when he left office. You see Gerald Ford really popular when he takes over as president because he's not Nixon. And then he pardons Nixon and really plummets in popularity from there. Again, never gets as low as Nixon because he wasn't involved. We know that through the investigations that he wasn't involved in the Watergate scandal or try to cover anything up. That was all Nixon. And so, but he's not going to sort of win in the election in 1976 against the next president. So here's Nixon's legacy. We find out there's corruption at every level of government, starting with the president and down in his executive cabinet, White House staff, all the way down to the FBI, CIA, or the FBI, like that guy that was the plumber. So it really called the credibility of the office of the president into question. Like, can we really trust, government officials? I don't think we should ever sort of have a blind faith in government, but we should be adamant because there are representatives. We want to be represented well and have integrity there. He's also going to be protecting the environment, though, some good things, right? Get us out of Vietnam. improve our relationship with China and the USSR, the Soviet Union, which had really never happened up to that time, and pave the way for nuclear reduction treaties. He's SALT 1, there's going to be SALT 2, there's going to be a START 1 and a START 2. Obama has a new START, so it even takes us into the 2000s, reducing our nuclear armaments between us and the Soviet Union, eventually Russia. Okay, so that wraps up Nixon and Watergate. Hopefully you understand that a bit better while I pivot and get to our next president to talk about. And I think I'll just talk about one more, and that will be Jimmy Carter. So hopefully you get a sense that Republicans were not popular, especially with Nixon, and that leads to a Democrat getting elected. But this next lecture, and this is where we're going to sort of house our next ones, is what I call Roots of Modern Global Conflict. We got out of Nixon. And then so we're going basically from every president from Nixon, which is Gerald Ford. So basically from Carter all the way up to President Biden. And so they had these pictures. I don't have one of Biden on there. I need to update that and get a picture of President Biden. But you see all the pictures of those current presidents. And so when George H.W. Bush, was in office, here was a picture of all the living presidents then. Here's Ronald Reagan, Jimmy Carter, Gerald Ford, and Nixon was still alive. And he was saying, hey, he was a president. So, let's take a picture together. Then here's when Obama was elected president. Within a month, you had all the former presidents get together again. Here's George H.W. Bush. So here he was when he was president. Now here he is. And then George W. Bush. Here's Bill Clinton. And then who's one guy that's in both pictures besides George H.W. Bush? Jimmy Carter. Here he is there. And here he is in this older picture. He is still alive. He's the oldest person that's ever been president. He's lived the longest of anyone that's ever been president in United States history. He's like in his 90s, was it 96 or something? So there's been no person that's ever been president that's lived longer than Jimmy Carter, if I'm making that clear. So again, here's the presidents. We're going from Jimmy Carter, then after Carter's Reagan, then from Reagan, George H.W. Bush, then from George H.W. Bush, we go to Clinton. And then from Clinton, we go to Bush W., the junior. Then we go to Obama. Then we go to Trump. And now we're at Biden. Here's the last time all the presidents that were living have kind of been together. That's at George H.W. Bush's funeral. This was 2 years ago now, in 2018, that he passed away. And so you see Jimmy Carter there. Here's Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton. You see Barack Obama and Michelle Obama. And then here's Trump and his wife, former First Lady Melania Trump. And they're all together, sitting together at the funeral, which, it's kind of awkward, I guess you could say. George W. Bush is there, but he's sitting across the aisle with the rest of the Bush family because it was their father that died. So that's why they're not seated with all the other President Trump and former presidents, because they're with the family because it was their father that passed away. So here's all the presidents in order: Carter, Reagan, George H.W. Bush, Clinton, George W. Bush, Obama, Trump, and Biden. And again, will he be president? Only until 2024 if he doesn't win re-election, or if he runs for a second term until 2028. Will he live that long? He's been our oldest elected president. We'll talk about that when we get to him, ever in American history. The previous oldest president was actually Reagan, and then Trump was the next oldest president, but they were both blown out of the water. They were both elected president the first time when they were 70, both Reagan and Trump. Biden is 78 when he got elected president this last year in 2020. So he by 8 years is our oldest president ever elected president of the United States. So here's Jimmy Carter. He's our next president that follows Nixon and then Gerald Ford. He was a peanut farmer, former governor of Georgia. He claimed that he was a common man. He had sort of common struggles. He was a farmer. He knew kind of what it was like to be a low to middle class income American. So he ran as a Washington outsider. He said, I will never lie to you. But we had the lowest voter turnout in American modern history, I guess we could say, the lowest since 1948 in the election of 1976. This was our 200th year anniversary. And yet we have really a very low voter turnout in this presidential election because people are really apathetic about government. We just came out of the Watergate scandal with Nixon. And so a lot of people really kind of apathetic about what's going on in government. And he proved to be very ineffective in working with Congress and could not get many things passed through Congress that he could sign into law, which is some of his failures. But domestic issues, he's going to have OPEC cut off the flow of oil to the United States. And therefore, we're going to have oil and gas shortages. And then also because of the Iranian Revolution, that's going to happen. So I'm going to keep going on. So the price of gas is going to really skyrocket when he's president. That's this time period, 76 to 1980. You see it just shoots up. This is going to add to his unpopularity, which is why he's not going to win a second term. And you see gas prices come down, and they do spike again when we're in the Iraq war. And now they're down. Now they're spiking again just in the last couple of weeks because of the pipeline that got shut down in the southeast United States and trying to get back online. It's like even at Costco, was that yesterday? It was $3.71, which is super high at Costco for Costco gas. But anyways, he's going to be a human and civil rights supporter. He's going to appoint more blacks and women within the presidential cabinet and executive offices than any other president up to that time. He's going to pardon draft dodgers. So if you weren't trying to go to Vietnam by leaving the country or going underground or going rogue or saying you weren't showing up, or you got arrested, you got thrown in jail, he's going to pardon you. So it cleans your record basically off. He's going to cut off military aid to Argentina and Brazil because he said they are human rights abusers. And he's going to have a very tense relationship with the Soviet Union because he's going to criticize how awful they are in terms of human rights, which is going to led to the delay of the SALT II Treaty, which ended up not being ratified by the Senate. It gets ratified when Reagan is president. So some other foreign policy issues. He's going to sign over the Panama Canal, which used to be an American possession. If you remember, Teddy Roosevelt getting control of that was in American hands in 1977. He said by the year 2000, I will give it back to Panama, which did end up happening. It didn't win him many friends, though. And then the Camp David Accords, we'll talk more about this in class, but helped sort of Egypt become the first country to recognize Israel as a country. And in return, Egypt got back the Sinai Peninsula. But Carter was the major go-between behind that. Sadat was later assassinated because Egyptian nationalists, Islamists, were really upset that he would negotiate with Israel, the arch enemy of Islam. So coming from a Jewish faith. Okay, other major issues. Really the biggest issue was the Iranian Revolution in 1979. Iran had a coup. They deposed someone that we favored called the Shah of Iran, who was an ally of us. But Iranian citizens really resented him. And it was young people that kind of stormed the country and threw off a lot of sort of the modern government that Iran had. And they installed a very, very conservative religious leader. His name was Ayatollah Khomeini. They're still ruled by Ayatollah. It's not Khomeini. He's long dead. But he led this rebellion and basically established a religious state. They're one of the few theocracies or religious states, countries in the world still to this day. And sort of feeling empowered, armed college students overtook the United States Embassy in November 1979 and took the workers that worked at the embassy hostage. There's 52 total of them. And that crisis lasted for 444 days. They're held in confinement. They're fed. They're not necessarily tortured, but not treated well. They have loud music playing. Not fun, right? And so Jimmy Carter couldn't get them out. He tried to rescue them with 2 secret helicopters flying in, but they ended up crashing into each other before they even made it to Iran. Made Carter look really bad. And so on the night that President Reagan was sworn in as president on January 20th, 1981, that's finally when Iran let the hostages go, but made Carter look really, really bad. And Carter also boycotted the Olympics that were hosted in Moscow, Soviet Union, in 1980, which, we get why he did it, but made Carter also look bad, like he couldn't involve himself in the international community or do something like athletics to try to spread goodwill and world peace, things like that. So here's some of the pictures. Here's the Camp David Accords. Here's the leader of Egypt and the leader of Israel talking, which is unheard of before because any Muslim, Arab, Islamist country does not talk with Israel. And again, we'll talk more about this in class. And here's the Soviet Union flooding into Afghanistan. This is going to be one of the reasons that the Soviet Union goes bankrupt and collapses in 1989. Really 1991. So, but again, here's Camp David Accords. And then after the Iranian Revolution, a lot of Americans very upset at the Iranians and the coup that happened in that country. So here's Jimmy Carter. In essence, his successes, he worked towards Middle East peace in the Camp David Accords. He continued energy conservation. He slowed down the arms race, even though the Senate didn't ratify SALT II. His shortcomings, he was very ineffective working with Congress, especially the Republican Party, but even the Democratic Party could not find much common ground with him. And then he had events that happened outside of his control, like the Iranian Revolution and the hostage crisis that happened there. So here's his popularity. It starts high and then slides, and then he stays really low. Again, he's not ever as low as Nixon in the 20th percentile, but he gets really low, like to 30% approval rating. So many Americans aren't really happy with him. And then the economy slides into recession through the energy crisis and the gas shortage again. And so, yeah, he's not going to get reelected because he's not that popular. You got to think, you got to be, at least in the 50s, usually the 60s to win an election, 60% approval. And obviously Carter's not there, so he's going to lose in a major defeat to Ronald Reagan. But some of the other major culture, the 70s, 80s, 1970, the first Earth Day happened under Nixon's presidency. We want to preserve Alaska and the natural resources there with the Clean Water Act, 1972. We had a minor sort of nuclear meltdown called 3 Mile Island in 1979. You could research that if you're interested. Here's the picture of it. And then the Sierra Club gets involved in litigation to protect the environment. So a lot of environmentalism takes off in the 1970s. Apple, Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak get started and form the Apple Computer Corporation. So here's Steve Jobs when he's still living. Peter Wozniak still alive, doing well. He's nice and wealthy, but he has no connection to Apple anymore. The AIDS crisis starts. Just Say No to Drugs campaign starts. There's the pay gap between men and women. Women are continuing to enter the workforce and are demanding sort of pay equality, which is the Equal Rights Amendment, which ends up not becoming an amendment to the Constitution. Saturday Night Fever, very famous movie of the time period. So that brings us to Ronald Reagan. I think this is where I'll stop, though, in terms of, we'll get to Ronald Reagan later. I just want to get through two presidents and not take too much time. So a little over 20 minutes. That's pretty good for me, isn't it? So thanks for watching, taking notes on wrapping up Watergate with Nixon, talking about Gerald Ford, and then getting to Jimmy Carter. We'll continue with Reagan and George W. Bush later. See ya.